We can't put it off anymore. One to forget yesterday, for sure. So we're going to spend 20 minutes talking about it. A 6-0 defeat at home to Chelsea. Do you want to go first, Glenn? What upset you the most about the result yesterday? That was a big sigh.
Yeah, it was awful. It was insipid. It was gutless. It was spiritless. There was nothing about it that was any good. We didn't do the basics that you have to do to win any football match against any opposition. You know, you've got to close teams down. You've got to go with runners. You've got to win your headers, win your tackles. We didn't do any of that. So I'm not interested in how good Chelsea were, and they were very, very good. We would have lost to absolutely anybody yesterday with that mindset and that type of performance. It was just atrocious. I don't think, apart from Fraser Forster, maybe Kyle Walker-Peters, I don't think anyone came out of it with any credit. Ralph certainly didn't. He made mistakes as well. I didn't understand it right from the lineup at the start. We 3 at the back has worked really well against Chelsea in the past, and he didn't go with that. We started off the game. We had a little flurry at the start, and then Timo Werner hit the post twice. That should have been the signal to change things around. While it was still 0-0, whilst we'd got away with absolute murder, because he's hit the bar from 5 yards, hasn't he? That should have been the point to change it, to maybe, I don't know, drop Romeo into the back 3 or something. And eventually we're 4-0 down before any changes get made, by which time it's damage limitation, which I'm not sure the changes that we made limited the damage, or the fact that Chelsea have got to play Real Madrid on Wednesday and they just phoned it in for the last half an hour. There certainly didn't seem to be much change at the start of the second half when we shipped in another 2 goals. So I was getting strong Leicester vibes all the way through it. I think at 3-0, it's 3-0, 20 minutes. And at that stage, I was thinking, this is exactly the same as the Leicester game, where even before the incident where Bertrand got sent off, you could tell we were going to get hammered. And it just seemed like we had no belief that we were going to do anything other than get beat, and we just stood there and let them play. And there was a lack of in-game management from the players and from the manager, and it was just atrocious. And it was one of the least unenjoyable, is that a word? One of the most unenjoyable games I think I've ever sat through. It's just from about 50 minutes onwards, I just want this to end, you know. And I looked around at my son and my dad, and I thought, if either of these want to go, want to leave, then I'm right behind them. But I wasn't going to say it first, because I know Dan would have rinsed me for that. So I was looking at him going, come on, should we do it? But,
Shall we? Yeah.
But no, we stayed to the end again, and we lost 6-0, and it was absolute crap from start to finish.
Tough one to watch yesterday, wasn't it, Steve?
Yeah, not a great return for me.
It's your fault.
Yeah, and obviously coming down from London meant that I was on a train down with a load of Chelsea fans, and basically once the 6th went in, I decided, I don't fancy a train home with this lot. So went and got an earlier one back up. So yeah, missed the last half an hour, which doesn't sound like I actually missed anything. But yeah, I mean, it was garbage, wasn't it? And I mean, as Glenn says, we've done well against Chelsea in recent years by playing, basically matching up their system of basically playing 3-4-3, and kind of cutting off the supply to the wing backs. And yeah, I mean, you only have to see the amount of space that Alonso had for that first goal to see that clearly anything that we had worked on just went straight out the window. And you had individuals just making such basic mistakes, like they could barely pass 5 yards to each other. And yeah, just a complete lack of leadership, lack of ownership of their own situation, really. I mean, certainly the system falls on the manager, but even when you're out there as a player, surely you take responsibility in your own performance.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's barely anybody out there, I reckon. I mean, Forster played well, and without him, it's double figures for me. But everybody else, I mean, or do you give them a 1 for turning up? L'Équipe would give them all zeros, and I mean, you'd struggle to argue with that. It was pathetic, and the thing that is concerning is that despite the fact that we continually see this team making strides every so often, but we then seem to oscillate straight back to being an absolute shambles within like a few weeks, and without anything really seeming to be the catalyst for it. There was no rhyme or reason why we went from that month of getting results against City, Spurs, and Man United to then losing at home to Newcastle and Watford in the space of 4 days. It was just baffling, and I mean, we're on that curve again now, aren't we? Where next week, realistically, we're probably going to be crap again. And then after that, we might sort of sort ourselves out, pull ourselves together, and get back on the horse again. But it's so frustrating that we don't seem to be able to kind of find a sort of. I mean, yeah, at the end of the day, we're a mid-table team, so we are going to be naturally inconsistent. The players we've got, the reason they're playing for us is because they're not of the level where they can put those top performances in, week out. But surely they're able to at least have a sort of base level that isn't a 2 out of 10 performance. That base level should be at least, even if we're playing poorly, that should be a 5 maybe for people. But I can't think of a team that has such wild sort of fluctuations from being so good where they can genuinely compete with the top teams in the country, and then on another given day, like literally a few weeks later, can look so absolutely pathetic. It's baffling, and ultimately that is Ralph's one thing that he needs to find a solution to at some point, because otherwise, realistically, he's going to be hitting a glass ceiling as well as these players.
So Finn Barkelly, who's watching on YouTube, says, "Evening, lads. It's concerning that we can still put in these performances where we get completely destroyed. 6-0 was flattering. It could have been double that." Dan, do we think that these sort of maulings were behind us? Because I was starting to think that those days were gone, but yesterday it all came flooding back.
I certainly thought they were gone. I thought one of the things that Southampton have improved at this season is their mentality. They've shown in other games that they can deal, or they have dealt with setbacks. But I think Ralph after the game said that he saw against Chelsea behaviours that even he thought had disappeared, and I can only imagine those behaviours are just, as Glenn and Steve have already said, just the most basic of errors that for some reason his players can't understand or grasp the situation they're in. As Glenn said, the warning signs were there for after 5 minutes, when Timo Werner, who I think has now scored more goals against Southampton than he has at any other Premier League team combined, when he's hitting the bar from an open goal, you think, blimey, I mean, this is a warning. And it just wasn't heeded. And the players just seem to go into this mode where it's like, no, we'll carry on, we're fine, we're 4-0 down, but it's fine. But it's not. I mean, everyone in that stadium could see they are getting absolutely battered in every single department on that pitch, apart from the players, it seems, who just weren't able to read, or clearly couldn't read the room. And as Steve said, I mean, we were talking about, in January, we were saying, well, probably top half may be off, and then they go on that really good run. And then you're thinking, oh, well, maybe they can. And then they lose to Newcastle and Watford. You're like, oh, well, that's more of the Southampton we know. They are just consistently inconsistent. And I think we all said at the start of the season, you'd rather have fewer of the highs and fewer of the lows and more of the middle, but they are still just stuck in that rut of they go on and they won't lose a game, or they might lose 1 in 10, and then they go and lose to all the teams that they shouldn't lose to, and play as they did against Chelsea. I think I said before coming on air that Saturday was the perfect combination of a team whose season is over versus a team that had 2 pretty disappointing results, had been lambasted by their manager in public and behind the scenes, and absolutely turned up with a point to prove. Southampton should have known that was coming. Ralph said in the week that it doesn't matter how many games Chelsea have lost in a row, they are still a top team. But his players were just at sea from the first whistle to the final one. And it should have been 6-0 at halftime. And that game could have been 10, 11, 12. Chelsea stopped playing towards the end and took their foot off Southampton's throat. But that could have been anything. I mean, they could have scored more than England's opening batsman in the Caribbean. So,
not saying much.
They did, didn't they?
Glenn, let's go back to that starting lineup, because we talked last week about the change from the 4-2-2-2 and how it hadn't worked, and actually we thought he might not go with it. But I think you said last week actually he probably will abandon the 4-2-2-2 again, because that's how we played against Chelsea and got some results out of it.
Yeah.
So were you surprised to see the team used and the changes?
Well, I think in that League Cup game when he went to 3 at the back, and I think that was more because he wanted to play all the other players, and that was how it fitted with the 11 players that he wanted to play. But it worked well, and he's used it against in a couple of other games after that as well, and it seemed to be a pretty decent alternative way of playing. I just thought, you know, against Chelsea, as Steve said, you match up their formation and it seems to work. Like the 4-2-2-2 works very well against Manchester City, and we've yet to find a formation that works well against Liverpool. So, but you know, we had done something against Chelsea in the past, so I was surprised that he didn't bring in a third, you know, either Jack Stevens or Jan Valery from the start. Let's face it, we wouldn't have missed Elyounoussi or Stuart Armstrong yesterday, because they just did nothing. So I was surprised, and I was, as I said earlier in my opening rant, I was a little bit surprised that they didn't at least have the players ready to switch to that formation should it be needed. And to me, it was needed after those 2 misses by Werner. But you know, indecision was final. We waited another 5 minutes and we're 1-0 down, another 5 minutes and we're 3-0 down. And then the game's completely stuffed. So, I mean, if you were going to, obviously Brozier couldn't play. You got, you know, if you're going to play 4-2-2, you have to pick another striker. Shane Long's injured. So Adam Armstrong came in. I don't think anyone could have, you know, sort of complained about that pick. Other than that, it's what has become established as our first 11 when he plays that formation. But I just think it was the wrong formation, and I was moaning to anyone who would listen to me at the start of the game, sat in the ground. But the other thing I would say is that with the players having the mindset that they seem to have yesterday, and you know, the basics, not tracking runners and all that stuff, it wouldn't have mattered what formation he'd put out there. And I don't think he did himself any favors. But with the players playing the way they did, I mean, you know, I don't want to plug my blog too much, but I said it was like 4 training cones would have got closer to the Chelsea players than the 4 that we had in midfield. And if you aren't willing to do the basics off the ball, you get beat by anybody, let alone a team as good as Chelsea with a point to prove, as Dan said. So yeah, I think the rot was set with the starting lineup, but I don't think that's by any means the be all and end all of why we lost, because I don't think it would have mattered what he did.
And the change of shape before half time, Steve, that's always an admission that something's not quite right and that perhaps he's got those tactics wrong.
Yeah, but I mean, as Glenn said, that kind of came. That was very much a sort of shutting the stable door after the horses bolted scenario, wasn't it? Where actually, if he'd, I mean, I'm not necessarily saying you make a substitution 3 minutes in, but you could see the way this is going very, very early. And yeah, I mean, as I say, when Glenn suggested it earlier, you maybe stick Romeo in as a sort of stopgap centre half for at least, maybe even just give it 10 minutes.
Yeah,
just to see if changing to that system kind of stems the flow a little bit. If it does, then okay, you can then look at, okay, what do we do personnel wise, because we want to get Romeo back in the centre of midfield. Who do we then sacrifice? Maybe still make a first half sub, but ensure that you're sort of key players are still in position, and you've not disrupted things too much.
He did that in the Stamford Bridge game, didn't he? In the Premier League, he actually dropped Romeo into central defence because Chelsea, I think, went 1-0 up in that game, and he did, as Steve said, change it to just halt the momentum. But...
And it worked.
Yeah.
We got back into the game in that game. And it was only, I mean, to be honest, there's an argument we'd have won that game if Prowse hadn't been sent off.
Mm-hmm.
We were well on top second half. And yeah, it's frustrating that lessons appeared to have been learnt and now they appear to have been unlearnt, which is slightly concerning. But I mean, I actually kind of disagree with the idea that that we kind of want to just a sort of flat. We don't want to have to experience the really high highs, sort of in exchange for having the really low lows. Because actually, I think that's a little bit more interesting. If we're now assuming that we are a club that is probably in that, well, we'll have to do something pretty spectacular to get relegated, then what are you playing for exactly? We're not going to get top four. European place via the league is unlikely, given the number of other teams with far bigger resources, and obviously now throw in the murderers into that mix as well from next season. You would assume Newcastle are going to spend silly money over the next couple of years to start competing. So yeah, there's fewer places available. So what are we looking at? 9th in a cup run? Okay, in which case, give me fun. Make the games fun. Which, to be fair, I mean, largely over the last 2 or 3 years, we've generally been quite good to watch, even when we're a little bit calamitous. But yeah, I mean, you'd rather just cut out the silliness of the really low lows and kind of just push that sort of floor up a little bit. I can take us getting a hiding off a big team if we set ourselves up to kind of go at them and their quality tells and they pick us off, and these things happen. Better sides than us have been given a hiding by Chelsea before. But yeah, it's just when games like yesterday happen where it does just seem as if nobody's kind of, it's not even anybody's on the same page. It's like nobody's even opened the book. It's just baffling and just immensely frustrating.
Vanessa says, I took my youngest for her first ever men's match at St Mary's yesterday. We left when the 6th goal went in. I think you did well, Vanessa, to stay that long. She said, I've never left early before, but I just couldn't bear to watch it any longer. I don't think you were the only one, that's for sure.
He went to bed thinking Timo Werner's the best striker in the Premier League.
Dan, is this about test of character now for the rest of the season? And are we just in danger of it all fizzling out now, do you think?
Yeah, I think it almost
if it hasn't already.
I think it was.
Am I in denial a little bit?
Yeah, you're looking for that kind of cliche reaction, and then you're thinking you've got Arsenal, and okay, that result kind of kills Burnley today. I think maybe, but they if they don't beat Southampton after the Arsenal, then you think, okay, well, Burnley probably are definitely going to go down then. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know what you can, because it's just the same problems over and over and over again with these players, and and Ralph does take his share of the blame for that as well, because he is the one that is coaching him in the week. But for me, Ralph didn't react quick enough in the game, but the players, I think, really let him down, because they have played well against Chelsea in the past. And as Glenn said, the bare minimum is just try and get your man, or try and win the ball, win the second ball. Press, like, I mean, I was watching clips back of Shea. You got the 3 Chelsea defenders, and you've got Armstrong, Shea, and Elyounoussi, and then like Shea's the only one pressing, and you just think they just play around it all the time, and everything was just disjointed. Yeah, I don't know where they go from here. I'm sure Ralph will get put a firecracker up their backsides, but they don't listen, because they still get beat. So. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, bring on May.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? George says, what's the best way for us to realistically rectify these problems? Is it new players? Is it a different system? Is it the training? Is it the manager? Is it a bit of all three, or three or four there, Glenn? Because there's a lot of things at the moment that don't seem right.
It's, I mean, I personally think the limit for a lot of the players that we've got is getting to 36, 37 points, staying in the Premier League. Then they're happy. They don't. A lot of them don't seem to have the mentality of, I want to push on. I mean, I remember after we played the little run of games against the big teams where we picked up 8 points in 4 games, whatever it was, we were all looking at the fixture list and going, Watford, Newcastle, this will be where we prove we're either going to be top half comfortably. If we'd beaten Watford and Newcastle, we'd be finishing 9th, something 8th or 9th maybe. We lost to Watford and Newcastle. Now we're going to finish 15th. That seems to be the massive turning point. That, a genuinely good side would have pushed on. They wouldn't have lost to Watford and Newcastle. But I just think that we got the points. Suddenly we were on 34, 35, whatever it was. You're looking at the bottom 3 cut adrift and going, and Everton down there and thinking, well, we're not going to go down now, foot off the gas. So you're looking at individual players to try and do it for themselves. So, or do something for themselves. I don't know. We always need to pick on Nathan Redmond, but someone like him should be banging down the door, trying to get into the side to make a difference. I mean, I was impressed with Will Smallbone yesterday when he came on. He was the one highlight of the last sort of 20 minutes, if you like. He came on and actually tried. And I hope they give him a game next week, because if Elyounoussi is going to play like that, then you can get in the bin, mate, and we'll get rid of you in the summer, because that was pathetic. It was absolutely pathetic. So I'd like to see it shaken up a little bit but only with, players have become first choice for a reason, and players are out of the side for a reason. But someone like Smallbone, who comes on and does well for 20 minutes, he deserves a shot. I felt sorry for Adam Armstrong as well, because he did all right first half, but he got sacrificed. I mean, someone had to bring Diallo on for the damage limitation. But I'd like to see him shake it up a little bit, and those who have underperformed the last couple of games, I don't want to go in too hard because he's young, but Tino Livramento was terrible yesterday. So let's have Perot back in the side for the next game. Let's just shake it up a little bit, and just send a message that that sort of drop off isn't really acceptable. But the players who come in have got to be prepared to step up.
I think you should read out Super St. Christoph's point, because I think that's a very good one.
This says, so he says, when Bednarek didn't want to play against City in the Cup in case he got injured before Poland's World Cup playoff, the playoff game, and Ralph agreed, we surely got a problem there. Did you catch up with this, Steve? This was kind of when you were away. Bednarek's head wasn't in the right place, and so therefore we didn't play in our
I
Cup
saw
game
that.
because of the Poland. It was all a bit odd.
Yeah, I'm not keen on that. I must admit. I mean, at the end of the day, while I'm obviously supportive of any player wanting to play for their country, we pay the wages, and whilst you're playing for us, and whilst you're sort of not in an international period, then you've got to be in the right mindset to play. And yeah, I mean, I don't understand how he's just walked straight back into the team there. And it's not as if he is like a Van Dijk figure where he's basically undroppable because he's so much better than everyone else. He's not. He's been bang average for a year, maybe longer,
since he signed his contract.
Well, yeah, pretty much. And yeah, so I guess the question is, do you trust the potential replacements to perform to the same level? I mean, Jack Stevens.
Trouble is, Stevens came in against City and he was really poor. So
yeah. But part of the problem is because we've now settled on a starting 11, that all the fringe players who were getting quite good game time earlier on in the season, because we were rotating it a little bit pretty much every game, sort of making 2 or 3 changes each time to keep everything fresh. Now all of a sudden we're not making those changes, and anyone who comes into the team is rusty. It's the Yoshida factor, isn't it? You give these guys a run of 6 or 7 games and they get themselves up to the level. But you ask them to come into a big game first up without having played for 6 weeks and up against arguably the best team in world football at the moment. And yeah, of course you're going to get shown up. That's the reality of the situation. I think we need to, and with the Bednarek situation, I think a line in the sand possibly had to be drawn there. If it is as black and white as Ralph seems to have said in the media, in that he said, well, his head wasn't in the right place to play. I'm sorry, that's not acceptable. You sit on the bench for a while until your head is in the right place.
It's certainly a case, I think, like you say, Dan, just bring on May and see what might happen there. You spoke to Ralph after the game yesterday. Was he down about it? Was he trying to be positive? What was his take on stuff after the match?
I mean, he didn't come in wearing a party hat or with party poppers or anything like that, with a glass of champagne. Yeah, he was pretty pissed off with what he saw. Thought he spoke very clearly. Obviously, it was still very raw. Didn't kind of pick through the goals. I think he acknowledged they were all terrible. Yeah, it's always difficult in that situation because what else is he going to say other than it was a shambles? And that's all he kind of did say, to be honest.
Glenn, do you think we'll end up better than we did last year? Just looking back, I think, was it 15th last season, 43 points. We're going to be there or thereabouts this year as well, aren't we?
Yeah, it's going to be. It's
not
going
really
to be about
progress. It's not really progress.
No, and in some ways it's worse because, you know, last year we were decimated by injuries. We had a very small squad. This year we got a better squad, and you've got to be looking to improve, having invested money and bolstered the squad. So finishing 15th isn't good enough. And I mean, you don't know what targets are set at the start of the season, but it certainly wouldn't have been to finish exactly where you finished last season. They would have been hoping for top 10, if not a significant improvement on the number of points gained. And at the moment, I mean, I can't think how many. Well, it's hard to look at fixtures and say how many points we're going to get. We could well finish on we're on 36 now. We could well finish on 38.
Yeah,
the way things are going at the moment with a couple of flaky draws. You know, just making up the title. We might not win again for the rest of the season. We certainly won't if we play like we did yesterday. And I'm thinking back to that other recent game where we were horrible at Villa, where it was a similar sort of thing, where there was movement from midfield players and we just didn't go with them whatsoever. So if we carry on playing like this, we're gonna do it actually worse points wise than last season. So I think Ralph will be very, very keen that we sort it out, even if some of the players aren't. And I genuinely believe that some of the players, you know, it's the old cliche on the beach. I think a number of them are. And I must say, I didn't think too much of the Bednarek thing at the time because it was a cup game and he was looking to rotate players anyway. But yeah, it is poor when you think about it. That because I can't imagine that Bayern Munich rested Lewandowski or even Villa rested Matty Cash.
Well, what was Southampton's? That was their biggest game of the season, essentially.
Yeah,
they weren't the FA Cup quarter-final. That was, you know, they lost that and their season's over. Had they won, then
yeah,
and you know, but yeah.